We have a story here that is utterly devastating, and I'm sure a number of you have seen this. This, believe it or not, is in CNBC. Nearly half of families with kids can no longer afford enough food 5 months after child tax credit ended. This is by Carmen Reinicke. Apologize if I butchered that name. Before we dive in, I just want to make the point, you guys, do you remember when the child tax credit passed, how the Biden administration and Democrats were so insistent that this was like, the bastion of progressivism? We're cutting childhood poverty in half. See how wonderful we are and how progressive we are. And then they let it expire a year later. So first of all, there was no reason that the program had to be written to expire. They could have just written it as a permanent program to start with. And then when it was going to expire, they could have extended it. On both fronts, they refused to. And now 48% of families with kids cannot afford enough food 5 months after the tax credit expired. And I just want to note that a large portion of those families, it's not just that they can't afford enough for their kids, it's that they're all, as an entire family, skipping meals. So it's not just like we're all eating a little less than we would like. People are skipping meals, you guys, while Biden and the Democrats want to tell us that the economy is booming. Without the child tax credit, Stormy Johnson has been skipping her own meals so her kids can eat. Johnson, 45, works as a student support specialist in Preston County Schools in Kingwood, West Virginia. Before the monthly enhanced child tax credit payments lapsed in December, she received an additional $500 each month for her 2 children, Violet and Tristan, whom she parents alone. But it's been a struggle for sure, said Johnson. I'm just making sure that my kids have what they need, and I honestly think it's taken a toll on my health physically. The child tax credit was expanded in 2021 through President Joe Biden's American Rescue Plan. The legislation boosted the credit to $3,000 from $2,000 with a $600 bonus for kids under the age of 6 for the 2021 tax year. Half of the credit was delivered in monthly payments, which ran from July 21st to December 21st, in deposits of $300 for children under the age of 6 and $250 for those 6 to 17. Families received the second half of the credit in a lump sum when they filed taxes this year. Now, 5 months after payments stopped, many families are struggling to make ends meet. Nearly half of parents who used to get the checks now say they can't afford enough food to feed their families, according to a May survey of 500 parents from Parents Together Action, a nonprofit. In addition to the increased costs of food, families and noticing rising prices of gasoline, childcare, and rent due to inflation, the survey showed. More than 90% said that they are finding it harder to make ends meet right now, and more than 60% are struggling to satisfy their family's basic needs. Beyond cutting back on things, most families said they've stopped saving for the future and have tapped into their emergency savings to stay afloat. Others, like Johnson, have skipped meals so their kids can eat. Her family has also had to cut back on foods like chicken and fresh vegetables because they are too expensive, she said. Quote, I know I need to take care of myself to be able to take care of my kids, said Johnson. But at any given time, if you give me the option to do for my kids or do for myself, especially when it comes to something like food, I'm not going to let my kids go without. So parents going hungry so that their kids can eat. And I do want to be clear, there were other families where there wasn't even enough food for anybody to eat. So they're all skipping meals and having limited meals per day. Okay, this is the state of the country right now. And I also just want to drive home, you guys, in a country with over 300 million people, 48% of families, I mean, just do the math. That's a number of people that none of us could even begin to wrap our minds around. Try to picture 100 million people or whatever that would amount to, right? That 48% of that, I mean, you just try to even imagine, right? So this, again, you guys, Biden and the Democrats, trying to sell you a ridiculous idea that the economy is booming and recovering and growing and all of this, when obviously that is not the case. The only metrics by which that might be the case is the record corporate profits that we have seen during severe increases in prices for consumers. So what we've actually seen is an allowance of price gouging due to our allowing our economy to be so consolidated, at least a lot of industries, to be so consolidated into a few number of companies that gives them the leverage to gouge the shit out of all of us on stuff like fucking food and gas, right? Yet another extraordinary failure of the Biden administration while they're trying to sell you the exact opposite. And I think that going into November, they know that this is going to be a disaster for their party. And I think that's part of why we are seeing all the hyper fixation on January 6th right now. We're going to get into some of that a little bit later too. But the Democrats clearly here very desperate. And the one thing that they have taken off the table, the one thing they refuse to do is materially improve your lives. That's the one thing. How many weeks ago, you guys, was it 5 or 6 weeks ago, where Joe Biden said that he would be doing something about the student debt issues in the next few weeks? That's direct quote. He said in the next few weeks. Well, now it's been 5 or 6 and he's done fuck all. The one thing they won't do is materially improve your life. The one thing that would earn them votes is the one thing they won't do. So I don't want to see anybody blaming voters come November when the Democrats get mollywopped. I don't want to see it. I'm tired of it. And almost everybody who's paying even a rudimentary level of attention, almost everybody is extraordinarily tired of it. If you want our votes, earn them. You can do a number of things to do that, and they're not even difficult. Many of them don't even require Congress, but you happen to have Congress, and you still refuse to do a goddamn fucking thing. We're tired of it. We're done. All right, we're done playing this two-party game. So when the Democrats get killed in November, it will be their own fault for refusing to take any actions when they were given power. That's all there is to it. That's the entire story. But the voter blaming will persist undoubtedly nonetheless. So extraordinary failures here, you guys. Like, a lot of the policies we talk about are incredibly important. There are very few that I would say are more important than people's ability to eat. Right? Maybe the climate crisis is up in that same category, right? But your ability to have your most basic needs met is being challenged by this economy that we have set up. And the administration in power wants credit for doing nothing about it. Absurd. Absolutely absurd. The fact that the mainstream media goes right along with this too is equally absurd. I do want to give a little shout out here, a kind of surprising shout out to CNBC for actually covering that, because CNBC is usually on the exact opposite realm when it comes to their tone and their angle and their framing of these issues. They are an incredibly business-friendly, bank-friendly media outlet, and it's incredibly rare for them to call out our economic structure in the way that they did in that article, although they didn't necessarily apply blame to the right place, but they're at least pointing out that the problem exists, right? So shame on Joe Biden and Democrats for once again, refusing to take actions that they could take to materially improve people's lives. And even if you don't care about that, even if you're the most callous, crass human being on the face of the planet, and you just have reckless disregard for all the other human beings and their well-being, even if you don't care, and all you care about is the politics, this is going to destroy them in November. Absolutely destroy him. So in any potential angle, what the Democrats have done here for 2 years is either utterly incompetent or intentionally playing doormat for the Republicans. To whatever extent you want to say it's one or the other, that's up for debate, right? I think at this point, the party as an institution essentially plays gatekeepers for the Republicans. I think that's basically their role. Now, again, I'm sure there are individuals within the party that don't want that, but that's the institution. That's how it behaves, correct? That's the results that we see. They play gatekeeper for Republicans. You guys, in the last 2 decades, if I were to ask a Democrat, what's your biggest accomplishment in the last 2 decades? What would they say? They would probably say Obamacare, right? A healthcare plan that was written by the Heritage Foundation, that was endorsed by Richard Nixon, that was endorsed by Bob Dole and Chuck Grassley, that was first implemented by Mitt Romney. That's what they would say. That's their big accomplishment. So in 2 decades, where there have been a number of years where they had not just power, but both houses and the White House, their big accomplishment is giving you a Republican policy. Anyhow, shame on Biden for this one. We will keep up on the obvious economic issues that have been going on in the country and seem to be on a path to continue getting worse. And again, the Democrats don't fall for it. You guys, they want to do this. They want to get persnickety about the words that we're using. Well, it's not technically a recession because, right, the economy right now is screwing a lot of people. That's what matters. The fact that 48% of families with kids are struggling to put food on the table. I don't care if it meets the technical definition of a recession. That's a fucking problem. Okay? So don't fall for their bullshit trying to claim that this is the best recovery in history and, oh, Biden's economy and look at all these jobs and yada, yada, yada. Okay? Look at the material results for everyday people and tell me this economy is great. You can't. Or you're lying. One of the two.